Hey guys.
Hello.
Nice.
Welcome to Unmasked. I'm Vanessa, and with Beth, you've probably seen her on with me before. And tonight we have Amanda with us as well. Hey, Amanda.
Amanda.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being
We're so
here.
glad you're here.
And tonight we're discussing the case of Skylar Neese. But before we start, just take a minute, please, to hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll be notified of all of our upcoming videos. So just really quick, I'm going to do this a little bit differently. We know that there's people with varying levels of knowledge on the case. So we were talking about this before we started. Just so everyone's on the same page, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to tell the whole story kind of in timeline order so that everyone knows all the details. And then at the end, we will open it up for chat to ask questions, comments, whatever. So don't think that we're ignoring you or anything like that. It's just easier that way, because if we stop for everything, then especially with my ADD, it'd be midnight before we got to the meat of the case. So anyway, we'll do that at the end. So really quick though, Amanda is here from our Patreon. So excited. And I just wanted to say thanks for coming here tonight. Amanda's gonna shed her expertise on the case too. And I actually just want to ask you what it is about this case in particular that, drew you in.
Yeah, I don't know that I have expertise, but I do have a pretty vested interest in the case. I think you see a lot of tragedies and senseless acts of violence that happen, and they can shock you, but some of them really leave a mark on you. And for me, thinking back to my teen years and thinking of the evolution of social media and the introduction of that when I was in college, you see these two very normalized behaviors, which is teen girls putting their entire life online in their social media. It's almost like a stream of consciousness, and you can see really what's going on between them. And most certainly in a platform like Twitter, which at that time, there weren't a lot of parents on Twitter, maybe they were on Facebook, but you're over here and you feel like you have the freedom to say what you want. And then the second element is just this pervasive toxicity that exists in teen girl friendships, where, the frenemy kind of mean girl culture that exists that we've all probably had to deal with at some point or another. And as toxic as both of these behaviors can be, it's strange in this case that in no way it prepares you for the dichotomy there of the level of violence that these young girls are able to carry out on one of their dearest, supposedly someone who was supposed to be their dearest friend, their sister. And it's kind of amazing to me that, Skylar, this beautiful, vibrant young girl who thought that she was trying to have these close relationships with her peers, could never see anything as a red flag because it's normalized in teen girl culture. And it just really drew me in. And she was such a vibrant person, so well loved by her friends and family. And they were warriors for her throughout her search and recovery and in passing Skylar's Law. And it really captivated me. And it's a case that's close to my heart.
Yeah, we were talking about this before we got on. And before we start, I know that Beth is not feeling well. So we're just going to put that out there. Her voice is kind of shaky at best. So
yeah, it's extremely hoarse. I apologize. I'm having severe allergies in the area that I'm in. We have a large pollen increase right now. So please forgive my voice. It is not the audio. It is actually my voice. So thanks for putting up with that in advance.
well, we just have to put that out there because, before we have in comments that what's wrong with Beth's voice? So, just wanted to put that out there. I think you sound just fine. But
Well,
I do too, Beth.
you look gorgeous.
Thank you.
So
thank you. So do you girls.
So for those of you who don't know anything, there's an echo. Let's see. Does anyone have another device we could turn down? I don't know why there'd be an echo.
I have nothing on.
I only have my one. Thank you, Charity. Let me know if
thank you,
cut.
Danny.
And we'll make sure there's no other devices on. Thank you. So I want to start talking about Skylar because I always think it's important to get into the victim. And I mean, that's what we're here for, and that's what this is about. So just a little bit about Skylar as a person. Skylar was an only child, which to me, I don't know, especially to a parent, it makes it hit harder. And I don't know, even sadder. But she had a 4.0 GPA, which is amazing, obviously. Went to school full time, and she had a part-time job at Wendy's. Mm-hmm. So she was a hardworking girl, a smart girl. She had ambitions. And we were talking about this. She wanted to go into law school and be a criminal lawyer, which is just so. And people described her as bubbly, a very loyal friend, and just a fun person to be around.
Right.
Oh, good. It's gone. Okay, thanks. And so I always try to, I know there's a little bit of background about the two killers. And like Amanda was saying, and she said so well, this is a hard case because we're talking about children. We're talking about 16-year-old girls here, which is hard to wrap your mind around. But Skylar was only 16 and her friends were only 16 as well. So we're going to touch on some of the stuff that Amanda talked about, but just a little bit of background on them. You might know more than me, Beth, but Rachel came from a very religious household.
That's correct. Rachel was very religious. She was also super talented. She was a more popular girl on her own. She had large friend circles. She participated in drama. She was a singer. And so, yeah, she met them in freshman year. She would have come into the friend group as far as Sheila and Skylar already being friends.
Right. And one of the other things I forgot to touch on that's so sad about this is that Skylar, who's the victim in this, met Sheila, one of the perpetrators, when she was only 8 years old. So just think about the level of betrayal right there alone. But yeah, they were 8 when they first met. And then Rachel didn't come into the picture, if I understand correctly, until their freshman year of high school.
That's right.
Yes, Rachel is the redhead.
Yes.
And so Sheila and Skylar had already had this long-term relationship since they were little girls, second grade. And then Rachel met Sheila first and then introduced Skylar to Rachel. And they had this, they were known as the Three Musketeers. They were close, they were inseparable. And it started out that way. And then unfortunately, as many 3-person girl friendships go, it just deteriorated over, I know, the betrayal is awful. It just kind of deteriorated. But go in order here. And I don't know if you guys want to touch on Rachel and Sheila's backgrounds at all.
Well, and let me know if I had the echo. I muted for a minute and it said it got better. So if it's pop out for a sec. But with Sheila and with Rachel, both of them also being only children, I think that also was a bond for the three girls.
Right.
Prime territory for the triangulation that was to happen later between the friends. But I think that they gravitated toward each other and that they could fill this sisterhood gap. And Rachel did have an older half brother, but he wasn't in the home with them. So she really had that same similar experience. And I think that's one of the things that really bonded us together.
Me too. And one thing about Sheila, I feel like, Sheila was the one that your parents were concerned about you being friends with. I mean, just to be totally honest, Rachel's parents had a lot of concerns, as well as Skylar's parents, were different than Rachel's parents and had tried to be accepting to Sheila for years. But even they had their concerns about Sheila and the way Skylar started acting, and Sheila and Rachel in freshman year, it kind of started this party behavior. They were getting high, they were riding around, they were breaking curfew, they were sneaking out. So I feel like both sets of parents, Skylar's and Rachel's, were both concerned about Sheila.
As well as the friends. So the other friends that were not in this tight-knit interior group, Skylar's own friends, Rachel's own friends, outside of that, they were feeling a little uncomfortable with this new hyper-close dynamic and just that they weren't really thinking that Sheila was the best influence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things that it's kind of universal wherever you look, that Sheila was kind of the troubled one, if you want to label it that way.
Right.
Wild child for sure.
Yes.
And Skylar and Sheila even had a very tumultuous relationship. There were times throughout their friendship that they fist fought, like literally got into fist fights, and all of this compounded and got worse when Rachel came into the picture is when it started to really, and then the two started to seclude. So, but Skylar and Sheila had even been in fist fights. I mean, I guess they really were like sisters, fighting. But
exactly.
Yeah. Well, and just for timeline's sake, so to give you an idea of when all this kind of started, so we already said that Skylar and Sheila became friends when they were little, 8 years old. The three of them got to know each other their freshman year, which was in 2010. In 2011 is when things started to go sideways. Basically, in September 2011, they started their sophomore year. Their friendship was just rocky at best at that point. There was a lot of triangulation going on. They would do, the kind of teenage girl stuff, like they would plan what to wear and match and then leave Skylar out, those kinds of things. And she would kind of, and this is where the social media part comes in that Amanda was talking about. They would take to social media and they would post about it. And Skylar was kind of venting her frustrations at this point, if I understand correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she had some things, she was frustrated. Her friends were leaving her out and they were supposed to be her best friends.
Right.
She was taking to her social media to just sort of to talk about that. And also she was having some thoughts about, like, I know a lot of things about you, do you really want me on your bad side? And not in a malicious way, but in the way that teen girls are, like, we share secrets and we have this close-knit relationship. And why are we going to blow it up whenever we are, each other's confidants as well?
That's right.
And one of the weird things that happened, you guys, and this caught my attention, and I didn't know this until recently, maybe you know more about it, Beth, but there was actually a time, so they start fighting, right? And all of this, it just starts to go downhill. And you can really tell that Sheila and Rachel are the ones pulling away. Skylar is the one that's going to be the outed party.
Right.
But it's not your normal triangulation, push your friend out type of thing. It takes on a dark turn pretty quick because there is an incident in a science class, I believe it is, if I'm correct, where they are overheard talking about killing Skylar.
Right. There had been a murder in the town, and so everybody in biology class was talking about, disposal of bodies and this type of things. And And so the girls had a discussion, which was overheard by other students and the teachers, all of which, of course, say, we never had any idea. One of those students actually went and told Skylar, so she knew about it.
Mhm.
And she confronted the girls, and they were laughing and saying, that's not the case. That wasn't what we were saying. But that actually was said, and was, they were actually talking about that publicly in
Yeah.
class.
And before that, Vanessa, as well, whenever reportedly that whenever Skylar and Sheila had taken a spring break trip together, so even as early as the spring,
Mhm.
that they had a pretty rough week. They fought the entire time, and that when they got back from the trip, that Sheila told Rachel she's got to go.
Just to go.
And that's where it gets into this such weird territory that we were talking about.
Right.
So, this is kind of a common thing with the three girls being friends and one gets left out. But when does it turn to she has to go?
Well,
Right.
yeah. I think
It's such a leap, and thankfully that's not one that happens often. We're not talking about this as being, the most common thing in the world, but the really horrifying and fascinating thing about this case is how did you get from I don't want to be your friend to this is our only option.
And so there's a couple weird things leading up to this. I have this little video clip I'm going to play really quick. It's really short and it's kind of strange. They're obviously talking about something else before the clip starts. So I'm just going to come into the part where it's under a minute. They're playing a game. And this creepy, to me, this is one of the creepiest parts. Where basically they had been planning her murder for months. She had no idea, of course. And if I understand correctly, they would play this game where Sheila would put out, how would you rather die? And basically just to kind of, I don't know, almost like a sick way of toying with her. And if you think back, it's awful that she doesn't know what they're planning behind her back.
right.
So here's a little clip from one night when they're all hanging out together.
I had a grape popsicle, and that's not my pee. It's a grape popsicle, dude. You remember when you said grape stain on the couch?
Yeah. Yeah, but that was way over here because my butt got wet.
You said it 2 times.
Because my butt was freezing.
Would you guys rather suffocate or get shot?
Get shot.
Shot. Wait, depends on where.
Would you rather in the head?
Shot.
There would be no suffering at all.
Eaten by ants or suffocated?
Suffocate.
Drowning or suffocating?
Suffocating. It's almost the same thing.
I know, but it's not.
Right
Because
in her
if
head.
you were on a pillow.
Okay, so that's the story of Sheila's.
Disturbing.
Yeah.
So creepy.
So yeah, looking back, it's so sad that she's sitting there thinking she's hanging out with her friends. And obviously it was rocky at this point already. And we've got the social media tweets and her being unhappy, but at the same time wanting to hold on to that friendship, which is
Right.
what's so sad.
Yeah. So, and I think that you can really see it escalate online. Everything in retrospect, a lot of things you kind of can read into, but we really see that buildup happening. So before we go into the timeline of that night, I think it's kind of pertinent to look at Skylar's tweets prior to that. On July 4th, she said, "Sick of being at effing home. Thanks, friends. Love hanging out with y'all too." So she's upset. She's being left out, and she's venting this online. Then on the 5th, so July 5th, and I'm bleeping out for the tweets, okay? So it says, "Doing ish like that is why I will never completely trust you." And then, this really hits me. This is very sad. But right, just hours before she left her home and did not return, she retweeted her final thing was, "All I do is hope."
That is so sad that is
Yeah.
her last tweet.
That's right.
So I think that's a good context of what's going on immediately prior.
It is.
And we talked about this before too. This is, but of course, as a child too, you're processing things different. But when we go into the timeline of what happened that night, which is about what we're about to go into here, so as Amanda said, they've been fighting up to this point. Things are rocky. She's not really speaking to them. She's angry. Well, they've decided tonight's the night. It's gonna
Right.
go.
And right.
Well, and Rachel should have been at church camp, but there was some weather
Right.
postponed church camp, which another, thing that's out there is that she took that as a sign that it was
Right.
time to do it. So just horrifying. Girls had also pre-packed the trunk with what is ostensibly a murder kit with a shovel, change of clothes, towels to clean up afterward. I mean, really
Everything.
intentional.
And also, I mean, we probably should say this isn't exactly a normal situation. In sophomore year, Rachel and Sheila had begun to have an intimate relationship, which Skylar was aware of. Allegedly, she had witnessed this and possibly filmed it. But the girls had an intimate relationship that was going on at this point. So that was also causing Rachel and Sheila and Skylar were having I'm sure that made Skylar feel maybe even more left out, uncomfortable. I'm not sure, but that type of relationship had started to occur, which I think was one of the biggest things in this. I definitely think, it wasn't just because they didn't like her anymore. There was a lot of stuff going on too. Within Sheila and Rachel's relationship becoming intimate.
Well, and that's a lot of people that are familiar with this case will harken back to the tweet where Skylar says, I'd tell the whole school all the issues I have on everyone, which is a lot. Hashtag if I could get away with it.
If I could get.
A lot of people connect those things. We don't know that that's exactly what she was talking about. But again, a lot of these things look very ominous in retrospect.
Right. I think they were definitely concerned that she was going to tell them that about them. I think they were extremely concerned about that, especially Rachel with her image. And Rachel had a boyfriend. So, that was a big thing too. So I think that was I think that played a huge role in this.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys happen to know if they also worked at Wendy's with her?
They didn't. Sheila had worked at Chick-fil-A. I know Sheila had worked at Chick-fil-A, but neither one of them worked at Wendy's with Skylar.
Okay.
No. She was actually getting close to another girl, another classmate at Wendy's.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another just tragedy of this is that was she going to be okay? Was she going to make some other friendships that were stronger bonds with people that cared about her?
Right.
Very sad incident leading up to.
And I feel like she was going to as well because, they said that in coming up to this, she had started to try to branch out with old friends. She had reached out to them. I literally think she could have possibly been just about over this friendship and wouldn't have even wanted to be friends with them anymore. That's the feeling that I was getting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she was a well-liked girl. So it's not as if she was hurting for people to want to be her friend. But as we all know, even as adults, but certainly at 16 years old, if you've been friends with someone since the second grade, it's incredibly challenging to break that bond.
Yes.
Yep.
I agree.
And you're right, Amanda, that is really sad about that because it did look like she was really kind of severing ties. And maybe that played into it too. Maybe they sensed, I don't know, that she was kind of done with it. She sounds done with it in her last tweets, but then
she's exasperated. She's tired of being this way and she doesn't even know why. So I agree. I know we don't know what would have happened, but it's very upsetting to see that there were so many people in her life that loved her so much that these two people who meant her harm, that she wasn't able to get away in time.
Yes.
So we're going to go into the timeline of what happened to her. And of course, I know this is upsetting. This was an especially upsetting case for me. Anyone who has especially having a daughter around that age, younger, but still, that whole dynamic, that's just your worst nightmare. And
it's so scary.
It is.
That they were capable of that. I think that's what about this case that really got me is that these girls were capable of this with their best friend. That's just so shocking to me. I
I know. And that level of violence, because when we get into this, you'll understand what we're going for. So just, obviously, if you're tuning in, you know what we're about to talk about. But since it's a 16-year-old, just giving you a heads up that it is a pretty brutal crime. So if that's something that's going to upset you, just giving you a quick heads up. So we go into the timeline of that night. So we are at July 5th of 2012. And if I understand correctly, they'll fill in my gaps here, but she worked her shift at Wendy's
Mhm.
and came home. Was that
At
around
10.
10?
10 o'clock. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then, of course, this is where the stories vary, but we know from surveillance. But they had been pressuring her to sneak out, and she didn't want to. And
she was having some hangups, but she kissed her parents and told them goodnight and went into her room. And after a little while, she decided that she would do that.
Right. And the girls were texting back and forth during that time, which later will prove detrimental to those girls as far as their timeline. But they were actually texting with Skylar and preparing to meet up. So.
And I just want to add, as to, well, why would you do that? Or if you had a hesitation. But again, I can definitely see that if you're feeling on the outside and you get the opportunity and you think, you know what, maybe if I go with them, maybe things will get better. Maybe they'll start doing more. If you're being excluded, the last thing you want to do is turn down the invite. I completely understand.
Me too, especially at that age. You're not going to think that you're, best friends, regardless
would
of
ever do that. And that all comes down, we'll get into even her last words. Like, you would never think that they would do that.
No. So they're pushing her to sneak out. She doesn't want to, and they finally convince her to sneak out. So around, I believe it is 12:30?
12:30. Mm-hmm.
She does sneak out. And correct me if I'm wrong, the details on this are she leaves her window up, takes her screen off, because that's later found.
Mm-hmm.
And then places a bench under her window to help her get back in.
Correct.
Okay.
So then again, that's showing that intention. I'm coming back.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. So it looks like there's definitely an intention to come back, not run away. Right. So she leaves, and then I don't know, Beth, if you want to go into what happened when they got in the car and
Sure.
took a drive.
Well, when she left, it's important to understand the girls at this point had on hoodies and already had knives underneath their hoodies ready. Sheila had brought knives from her house. Rachel had brought a shovel from her dad's house. They had handy wipes, paper towels, change of clothes, trash bags, everything you could need, bleach. And so basically at this point they pick her up. She's sitting in the back seat and they have these knives, which I don't know why that's always just like they're so prepared. So they go over to Blacksville. It's actually on Sheila's uncle's property where they were. But they went over to Blacksville to a place that they had gone previous times. So Skylar probably wouldn't have thought a thing about this. They had gone there to hang out before. So I'm sure she was, not thinking anything as far as that's concerned. They pulled off the side of the road and they went into the woods like they had done. They needed a lighter. So Skylar was going to go back to the vehicle and get a lighter. The girls had decided that they would go on 3. And so when Skylar turned around, the girls Rachel allegedly counted to 3, and they both proceeded to come behind her and stab her. She tried to run, and when she did, Rachel tackled her. Rachel was bigger than Sheila. Rachel was about 5'8". Sheila was really tiny. And so Rachel was a little taller. And so Rachel and Skylar begin to scuffle. You have to understand, too, Skylar's a pretty tough girl. I mean, she's gotten into fist fights with Sheila. Like, she's scrappy. And so she got the knife away from Rachel somehow and cut Rachel on the ankle. And regardless, Sheila was continuing to stab her. So obviously, Rachel was able to take the knife back away from Skylar. They stabbed her over 50 times. They laid there and watched her as she died, and then took her cell phone, which was turned off, and laid it. Well, actually, excuse me. They were going to bury her, but the ground was way too hard. And so they took her over up near a tree. I covered her with debris and rocks and sticks. And like I said, took her cell phone, which was turned off, and laid it beside her. They did state that she just kept saying why. That was basically what she was saying during the whole attack, was why. And so once they got her covered up with the debris and the rocks, they both went back. They changed clothes. They cleaned out the car. They threw away everything. And those things that they took off and put in the trash bag, the clothes, the knives, none of that has ever been found. So that's still to this day missing. But they stabbed her over 50 times. And then at 9 a.m. the next morning, after this happens, Sheila tweeted, "Always keep your cool," which I thought was just
chilling.
That
shows you her mindset. I mean,
Yeah.
when I was that age, think back of my mindset. I clearly felt like a child.
Yes.
At the time you think you're not, but that's chilling.
It's intense. And then it's even more months and months later. I mean, after her body was found, we'll go into it, but Sheila tweets, "We really did go on 3." Like, I can't comprehend any of this. It's like the most horrific. And honestly, my heart breaks for Skylar. I cannot imagine, I think why would be the most appropriate word.
Right.
You could not believe that they would be doing this to you. So that just is something that I don't know, it stays with me. And to
have that realization.
Exactly.
Just shocking. I mean, and the lull of the false security, they had gone out there before. She had no idea. I mean, you can think of it as you're driving down a dark, desolate road, and maybe that would be scary. But with your 2 best friends that you do this with, she just had no idea. And that is gut-wrenching.
That's horrible. No one did. I feel like the whole community.
Oh, absolutely.
I feel like throughout all of this, the biggest shock was what had actually happened, because no one would believe that 2 teenage girls are capable of this with their best friend, but they were.
It's unbelievable. And that is the saddest part for me too, is when you try to put yourself in the victim spot and her asking why at the end. And I'm sure that was the last thing. And then you think figuratively and literally that their plan was to stab her in the back.
That's right.
Absolutely.
So it's just, I don't know. And so then, of course, this part's so sad to me too, because as a parent, but the next day, so her parents have no idea, of course, that this has happened. The next morning, her dad said that he went in her room, saw she hadn't slept in her bed, saw everything, and, figured that he later found the window screen, right? So he didn't know immediately that she had snuck out, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
Pretty quickly, he had a pretty bad feeling, I think.
Because she was supposed to have the car to go to Wendy's. He was supposed to bring her the car. So he was like, this makes no sense. And her room looked like it hadn't been slept in or touched. So I think he was concerned. And when he called his wife, I think she calmed him a little bit, because she said, everything's got to be okay. This is Skylar. If she doesn't come to work, then something's really wrong. So they're like waiting for the time when she's supposed to be at work, and then her work calls and says she's not there before they can even call them. And I think that's when they were like, there is something terribly wrong.
Yep.
Because she would have missed work.
The girls were pushing boundaries at that part, right? They're normal teenage rebellion kind of things. So upon finding out that she snuck out, you get the first calls that are like, you are in trouble, young lady. Like, where are you? You need to call me. And as that moment evolves into she didn't show up for work, that panic setting in, they did contact the police because it felt wrong. But prior to that, where do you start? You start with the friends, and really you start with the friend that you think that she would be with. So they did give Miss Sheila a call to say, do you know where Skylar is? Do you know what happened? Like, where she could be? And Sheila said, oh, no, I don't really know. I did talk to her on the phone around midnight. And they're like, but you weren't with her. You don't know anything. And she's like, no, just talk to her on the phone. So that's version one of many.
Mhm.
Right. And then Sheila and her mom come straight over, which I
Mhm.
thought was just, I mean, immediately Sheila and her mom come straight over. You know, Sheila's so upset, distraught, wanting to help. It was strange.
Well, and they come over after Sheila's second call. So she calls
Right.
and she says, hey, I need to tell you something. I want to tell you the truth. And actually, we did go out last night and we went joyriding around, but we left at 11 and we were gone for less than an hour and we were just driving around having fun. But we dropped Skylar off down the street because she didn't want to wake you guys up. We didn't want her to get in trouble. So I dropped her off down the street. I don't know what happened after that.
Yep.
And
The
so,
second lie.
yep. Oh, thank you, Seth.
Like Amanda said, of many.
So then you've got July 6th is the day, and then I don't want to leave this part out. They call the police, right, when she doesn't go to work. So investigators come, and if I understand correctly, they treat it like a possible runaway at first.
Mhm.
And this is when they're alerted that there's not going to be an Amber Alert. Teenagers leave sometimes. Let's wait a little bit and just hang in there and see if we can find her.
Right.
Which we'll touch on later too. But so you've got them treating it kind of like it's a possible runaway situation. You've got the first day, which must have been absolute hell for her parents.
Right.
You've got the next day, and meanwhile you've got Sheila helping look.
Oh, she's out canvassing the neighborhood.
Yeah.
She's bawling on Skylar's bed with her mother. It's disturbing.
And
she's really inserted herself from the first moment.
it is. It's crazy.
So sick.
And that's when Mary remembered that the apartment complex they had moved into had installed some new security cameras. So that's when they started to be like, you know what, we have these security cameras. Let's look at them and see what we see. And that's when they saw Skylar walking out and, obviously getting into a car with someone she knew. So that came right in that same time period. And, basically, I think their landlord thought that possibly it looked like an SUV. And I'm not sure if that's where that's stuck, but it doesn't exactly look like an SUV to me.
I have a clip of the surveillance. Do you want me to play that real quick and then we'll get back into it?
Yes.
Yeah, let's check it out.
This is our surveillance from that night when Skylar snuck out. So I don't see a SUV either.
There's a possibility, I might be wrong on this, or maybe someone in chat knows. I think there was a grainier version of this and it may have gotten cleaned up later. So I'm not 100% sure on that, but I have seen some still images that look pretty grainy. I don't know that I see an SUV, but it's not as clear.
Yeah.
Right.
And just worth mentioning, because we've been talking about the social media aspect of this the whole time, that on July 8th, Sheila tweets, "I'm tired of losing sleep over this." Poor Sheila.
Yeah.
Jeez.
We see this so many times over and over again. Sheila, the victim, right?
Oh,
my goodness.
So, and then, Amanda, is it July 9th, the next day that they bring Sheila in for questioning?
It's on the 9th, and she was questioned by Colbank and Spur. They brought in an FBI agent, Colbank from Star City, and then Spurlock from the FBI. They brought them in and questioned her.
Yeah, so you'll see throughout the investigation that there's some suggestions of connection to other crimes that are happening in the area. And there was a young, I think she was 3 years old, Leah Lunsford. She was missing in around the same area. So they brought the FBI in pretty quickly just to check it out.
Right. Yep, they did. And they also brought in the state police, Gaskins and Barry, correct, Amanda?
Yes.
They brought in the state police because they were investigating the robberies, and one of the suspects' brother, Dylan, had dated Sheila previously. So they were concerned that possibly these robberies had something to do with the murder because Sheila was related. So they sent in, they had Star City, they had FBI, and they sent in state police.
Wow. And I don't know if either one of you want to touch on her actual questioning. I thought it was interesting what investigators came away from, as their impression of Sheila.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know the exact content of the questioning, but the impression that one of the investigators came away with was that Sheila was narcissistic and quote unquote wrong.
Yes.
So we're giving off a
Yes.
strong vibe.
Yes.
Which I think.
And then the next day is when they contacted Rachel, and Rachel acted like she didn't even know that Skylar was missing.
Right.
So yeah, that was on 7/10 actually that they contacted Rachel, and she was at church camp.
Yeah,
And
Rachel had
she
gotten
said-
out of town.
Yeah, she got out of town, and she didn't go around, she wasn't like Sheila. This is, I guess, part of a difference in the girls. She didn't go around the Neeses. She stayed away from that whole situation. Sheila embedded herself in it. And Rachel, I have no idea. I had no idea she was missing. But when I get home, I'll come in for an interview. Obviously, she did not immediately come in for an interview. So.
Well, and what happened, just like, in any small town, so they get through the summer and they go back to school and they're starting their junior year at school. So now we're in September of 2012. And this is when everything really starts to get crazy. Basically, rumors are just exploding. And isn't there some kind of drug tie rumors? I mean, there's all an OD.
That's
rumor.
through that bank robbery. There was that was the reason why that was not able to be released when they did that, because there was some drug trafficking type ties to that. So I think that was a lot was talked about. I think a lot of people felt like if the girls were involved, that possibly something had happened accidentally, and then they tried to cover it up. But I know that a lot of Sheila's friends, especially like Daniel, some of her really close friends were just totally pressuring the girls as far as I was concerned. And I know there were some anonymous people online that were being pretty vicious, and you know this, and so.
Well, we have a lot of active social media. So where there's active social media, there's a lot of ideas about what could have happened. So including, people accusing Sheila and Rachel, there was drug trafficking, there was human trafficking, there was abduction, there was the bank robbery. Just a litany of things to sift through.
Right. And also at this time, there's a lot of things going on at this time, kind of simultaneously. Also at this time, investigators figure out that Sheila's story is not adding up to the surveillance, correct?
That's right.
Right. So when they're talking about that route, they have to go back and say, where else can we find some surveillance around town? And so they're not able to, corroborate their story about joyriding around Morgantown. So they're finding surveillance video from a gas station that's putting them in a whole other area. And then they also do go back and they look at that surveillance tape from the apartment complex, and they say, wait a minute, we see her leaving at 12:31, but I thought you picked her up at 11. So where's that footage? So a lot of things are coming full circle into you're not adding up, ladies. What's going on?
Lies and lies.
And another thing we see a lot in these cases that I thought was interesting, that I wanted to point out, is when investigators spoke to Sheila, they said she was stone cold, ice cold, just no emotions. Rachel, on the other hand, was very nervous, complete nervous wreck when she was talking to them, except, which is always suspicious, their stories were the same verbatim, word for word, which was one of the things that also tipped them off.
Exactly. And even as each version evolved, they would almost verbatim give the exact same account. So it was very, kind of a red flag for investigators. And with Sheila's attitude, she would go from one extreme to the other. She would either be an ice queen of I'm not cooperating or talking, and you can talk to my mom or you can talk to my lawyer, that kind of stuff. She's effervescent and bubbly, and there are some that say borderline flirty in some of these occasions. So just very pendulum swing of emotions.
Agree.
Well, and speaking of Sheila's attitude, around November of 2012, I believe it was, someone was asking about her tweets. She tweeted, "No one on this whole earth can handle me and Rachel. If you think you can, you're wrong." So little Sheila thinks she's tough too. And it's like she's playing a game at this point, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think she is. And I think she is so, I think in her mind, I think Rachel was more scared than Sheila. I think Sheila was literally so in her mind, like, I can get away with this. My mom will get me out of it. I'll get out of it.
I agree, Beth. And I also think that this bravado that she's putting out to everyone and being really aggressive with anyone that accuses them, I think it's also, she's trying to solidify Rachel with her.
Right.
Rachel's still in the fold, that Rachel's not going to tell. I think she's trying to be her protector, but also, manipulating her at the same time, or keeping, at least coercing her into staying in this tight-knit little group.
Right.
And the other interesting thing I thought about this is, so meanwhile, you've got everything heating up. You've got, Sheila acting like ice cold and almost, it seems like, putting out these little posts, like almost bragging about it. And then you've got Rachel, who is clearly starting to crack.
Right. And then, when the police got their cell phones, they got a warrant for all communication between the two. That was huge too, just because of where their cell phones were pinging and where they were. And the fact, like we mentioned earlier, that they were actually talking to Skylar through text during this time. They say they had picked her up at 11. They're preparing to go at 12:30. So that was kind of I think that warrant played a big role in it.
I agree.
And then the other part I thought was interesting is, so the town, and they talked about this a lot on what I had looked at, her parents are obviously distraught, upset, and everyone is suspicious at this point. And Skylar's parents are also posting kind of, I don't know the correct term, passive aggressive, or what, tweets towards Sheila and Rachel saying, "You have information." One said, "Karma's coming to get you." Stuff like that.
I think eventually with things that kept coming out, and the girls acting questionably all the time, it was making them feel like you have something to hide. And as that situation evolved, I can't even begin to imagine the frustration, the anguish that you're feeling of missing your child. And I think that every parent would have enough and say, these little girls are going to stop lying, and it's going to happen now.
Right.
I don't blame them. I think that's better than I would behave. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
But
I can't imagine. And it's crazy because in the beginning, they just never thought that they even told law enforcement, give the girls a break. They're missing their best friend. They're such good people. Skylar's parents are literally some of the best people I've ever read about in a case. They really are. And they were trying to be that way, but then it's like once that evidence started coming in, and Ellie is speaking with them, but at this point they've advised them not to inform Sheila of any conversations that they have or anything. So I think at that point, I read Mary said that she sat down at one point and wrote down everything, all of her experiences with Sheila. And she said by the time she got done writing that, she thought these girls are capable of anything.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think, man, that would have been hard. I'm sure just on that level to think, this girl's been friends with my daughter since they were 8. I mean, there has been a long,
Well, and beyond that, they treated her like a daughter.
They did.
That close-knit bond was not only the girls, it was their entire family.
It was.
I think that the double betrayal, that you have the betrayal of Skylar from her friend, but Dave and Mary, from what I've read, were really protective. They really cared for these girls, and whatever, kind of maybe issues that had arisen, they had really stuck by the friendship and helped these girls.
Yep.
But that makes it all the more sad that they are at the end of their rope. They're frazzled. They're going through the worst experience of their life. And they're still trying to have the strength to protect her friends who are her perpetrators. And it's just horrific.
It is.
And if you guys haven't seen any interviews with her parents, they'll break your heart. They're hard for me to watch.
They are.
Yes, and like if you ever get the chance to see the sentencing hearings where her dad speaks, her aunt speaks, her uncle, she just comes from a wonderful family is what I gather from that. My heart broke for every one of them.
Yep.
You just could never imagine something like this happening.
No, I just watched the sentencing today, and yeah, it was rough. So now we're up to the point, we're in December of 2012, and this is a really interesting part because Rachel has broken.
Well, Sheila's got to take a polygraph.
Sheila failed the polygraph, right?
Yes.
Volunteered to take it. Don't you know she thought she could pass that?
Yep.
Just knowing Sheila and studying her mannerisms and her behaviors, I feel like she's the type of person that would have been like, I can pass that polygraph. No problem. But she didn't, so...
And Rachel came unglued.
Yes.
Yeah, Rachel jumped out of a move-in vehicle to avoid hers and ran straight to Sheila's mom's work. So,
yeah. So, I mean, I saw someone mention that earlier, and I was like, "We're getting there. We're getting there."
Sorry,
we were like, "She jumped out of a moving vehicle." I was like, "Yes," and that was you, Mark. So anyway, so we're at December 28th, 2012, and I don't know if you want to call it a nervous breakdown, but basically Rachel has a nervous breakdown, whatever, for lack of a better term. And there's a 911 call where they call in, and if you listen to it, Rachel is screaming. Just they can't control her, so they actually call the police and just want them to come get her because they don't know what's going on, and she's just screaming incoherently. I don't know if she even. Do you guys know if she alludes to the crime at the time that she is having her breakdown?
no.
There is no, not to the crime, but she does threaten to hurt herself.
Yeah.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah.
She threatens to hurt herself. Again, I want to apologize for my voice. I see in comments. I'm very hoarse. I've got allergies right now, so I apologize for that.
Oh, no, you're fine. So basically she obviously goes to a hospital and she's in there for a few days. So she gets out on January 3rd, 2013. And Rachel, and you guys can fill this in if you want more details, but Rachel confesses to her attorney and the police that she and Sheila have killed Skylar.
Yeah, so when in the facility, she's not allowed contact, and Sheila's trying to visit her. She wants to talk to her, and that's not allowed. And so when she gets released, she is taken immediately to the police station, or I'm sorry, to an attorney. And then they get in touch with law enforcement, and she begins to take her procrastinated polygraph, gets 5 questions in, and shocks the room when she says, "We stabbed her." They were floored. This was nothing that was expected. You know, they thought they would get to the truth of what Beth was talking about, that something terrible happened and they panicked. They didn't know what to do. But I don't think that they were prepared really to hear that this is what had happened.
Right. Yeah, I think they were really in shock. I don't think I can imagine their jaws just dropped to the floor when she was like, "We stabbed her." 5 questions in, I'm sure they did not expect that. So,
No. And at this point, Rachel agrees to wear a wire, correct? And kind of try to get Sheila to implicate herself.
right. Well, they actually did surveillance in Rachel's room. Amanda might know better. It was a video camera, I think, and
she agreed to 2 things. She agreed to take them to where they had left Skylar, but she ended up not being able to remember exactly the place where they were. and there was snow cover on the ground. But she also agreed that she would set up this meeting with Sheila and that they could watch on video and hear the audio of the interaction with the girls.
Right. And when she took them out to the body, they weren't able to get the body because there was so much snow. So they were going to have to wait for the snow to melt off because there was nothing they could do at that point. It was so frozen over. And so they kind of had to put that on hold a little bit and eventually took some dogs back out. And that's when they realized.
Thank you, Ryder. So on January 16th, then, like Beth's saying, Rachel takes investigators out. And you had some interesting details on that, Amanda, when they go out to find Skylar.
Yeah, so just to rewind for a quick second, that little interaction with Sheila and Skylar where the police were watching.
Yes.
They didn't actually get anything from that except for that the girls agreed to stick together. And then the other very strange thing that came out of that was that they took a very odd selfie. They both just look frazzled. Rachel looks distraught. Sheila has the Cheshire cat grin on. It's very creepy. But yeah, so once the snow has melted a little bit, they are very anxious to get out there to see if they can finally bring Skylar home. And they set out with cadaver dogs to try and search the area. And it's frustrating because they've already searched that area before. But whenever they get out there, one of the handlers realizes that the GPS monitor that's attached to the dog collar had fallen off. So he's retracing his canine steps and bends down to pick it up and ends up, that's also where Skylar is.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And thank you, Teresa, Missy, Michelle, and Sheena. I love you guys. So the interesting part here is the kind of the timeline. Thank you, Shanna. Because she takes him out January 16th, and then, you know, obviously Skylar's parents are told that Skylar's body has been found, but it's kept quiet, if I understand correctly.
Right. Sheila doesn't know. They didn't tell, or actually no, that day when they found the body, they kept it quiet and then they announced it once it was confirmed. So it was quiet for a while.
And it took some time. Of course, the rumors world, they had that scene locked down for 48 hours. They had law enforcement out there. People are anxious. They want answers and they want justice. And so, yeah, it really kicked up the rumors again.
Mm-hmm. So then you're at March 13th, 2013, and investigators finally hold a press conference and they tell everyone that they have found Skylar. And I thought it was interesting that same day, Sheila tweets, I mean, if Sheila's not a true narcissist, I don't know who is. Sheila gets on and tweets, "Worst day of my whole life." So.
Yeah.
And Rachel tweeted something similar that was like, there's not a picture of it, but it was said like rest easy Skylar baby or something like that.
Okay,
so
this is what they say. All right,
perfect.
Yes.
So Sheila says, rest easy, Skylar. You'll always be my best friend. I miss you more than you ever know. And then Rachel, we don't have a picture of it, but this is what's reported that she tweeted was, rest in peace, baby. I love and miss you more than anything. May you finally have justice.
Wow.
Yeah, so crazy.
That's just crazy.
I keep trying to remember it's a public live. I'm watching my language.
I know you want to be like.
I do. My true thoughts here on these girls. 16 or not 16, it's sick,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion.
So the reason, they're trying to get things that will corroborate Rachel's story that she told and whenever she took her polygraph and then later told her confession. So they've been trying to get this evidence. And when, they were able to locate Skylar, that's a huge thing. And then also when they sent out the search warrants for not only Sheila's vehicle, but all of the knives in her home. They were looking for things so that Rachel wasn't just making up a cockamamie story.
Right, they had to have corroboration, right?
Yep. Yeah, because that was a hot button and everything, I looked at. I'm sure those of you who follow the case have seen that there was some, tension there over that. But yeah, all they had, like they just said, was Rachel's quote unquote story.
Right.
So I do want to talk about this really quick though. I mean, I think you have copies of this. In April, Sheila's tweets. She's on a tweeting rampage, and I believe that's when she tweets about.
We really did go on 3.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
She tweeted that on the 1st.
Yep. Which again is
another creepy April 1st tweet was, they say you remember the past better than it really was. Another weird one.
Yeah. Very weird.
Sheila's
strange.
Sheila's a peach. And that one bothered me the most though, because what is she? Obviously, she knows. I find this tweet really fascinating on so many levels, but obviously, she knows at this point. I mean, or she should have a good idea. And for her to have, the gall to tweet, we really did go on 3. I don't know.
It's shocking.
Dude,
the girls weren't talking anymore. So Sheila and Rachel said no more on that January incident. They said, Rachel, you can't have electronics. The girls were homeschooled from that point on, and they were not to speak to one another or their families. So I'm not sure what could be going through your mind whenever that discovery is made. You're not talking to your friend who really suffered pretty much a breakdown. To be thinking, then we're toast. They got us.
Right. And so, do you guys, or Beth, do you want to go into the arrest or May 1st?
Sure. On May 1st, Rachel surrendered. And on that day, let's see, on May 1st, Rachel surrendered. She was charged with adult status. They did decide not to charge the girls as juveniles. They were charged as adults. And then she made the plea deal. They gave Rachel a plea deal. If she would testify against Sheila, it would be dropped to 2nd-degree murder. And so she did that. So then Sheila was arrested after that in the Cracker Barrel parking lot. She was there having lunch with her mother, and she was arrested in the parking lot. And let's see, on the 17th of September. So it's taken some time throughout this to, with court proceedings and such. She was arraigned on and charged on multiple charges, including tampering with a body, murder in the 1st degree, and she pled not guilty at that time. And then on into October, you've got all the pretrial motions going on. And then finally, on January 28th, they brought Sheila back into court. And at this time, she did plead guilty. Her attorney, Amanda said it perfectly last night. Her attorney basically was like, there's nothing I can do, right? He was pretty much like,
it's indefensible. There's no
everything,
because they wanted to suppress Rachel's testimony. So they wanted to do that. They wanted a venue change. They wanted to get the date set back, an extension, and then something else. I mean, there was a few motions that they had put out there. The only thing that the judge did entertain was that they would postpone until February, and they actually ended up doing it January 28th. So even that they didn't get in full, but certainly Rachel's testimony was coming in. And after her attorney reviewed it, he just said, there's nothing I can do with this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was just too much evidence. And then Sheila was sentenced to life with mercy. That's like life with the possibility of parole, pretty much. So she could be paroled. I think her first parole comes up in 2029. And Rachel was charged with 2nd-degree murder.
Mm-hmm.
And she was charged for 15. Her parole comes up in 2024. She was charged with 30 years, but parole could possibly be in 15. So she's actually coming up soon for parole in a few years. And what's crazy is that they're both at Lakin prison. I don't know why I found that so fascinating
I do too.
that they would both be at the same prison. And I
Yeah.
would I saw some people asking in comments about, do we have any new
Yep.
info? Oh, I wish we did. Really, we
I
pretty
know.
much know the same things you do. But I think Vanessa had said they're not allowed to speak, right, Vanessa?
That's what I had read, that they're, even though they're housed together, they are separated and not allowed to communicate with each other. Yeah.
I think that's for the best.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I would agree.
So another thing I wanted to point out on Rachel's charges is that they did, in her agreement, and they did end up removing an additional charge that could have been in place, or set of charges, because Skylar was actually in Pennsylvania. So they crossed a border, and now you have an interstate situation. So happening in one state, a murder in another. They said, no, you guys have got it. So they kicked it back, but that was on the table and something that she avoided.
Yeah.
Yeah, she got a good plea deal for that, considering, you know. But I will say this: I know for a fact that when the nieces have said, when they come up for parole, just like you see in a lot of cases, you know, you see Sharon Tate's sister at every Manson family parole. I believe they will be at every parole hearing these girls have, and I hope it's a long time before they're able to be paroled, if they are. I think that the nieces will really fight hard against that.
Well, yeah. And thank you, New Girl. Thank you, Marshall. I don't know if you touched on this. I mean, you talked about Sheila, but I mean, I think it's pretty sobering to think about the fact that Rachel is up exactly 2 years from this month.
Right.
Yeah.
Can't imagine that would be, but I mean,
and it's the tragedy of that. Not only did you steal these people's precious child, you know, but now they have to live their lives worrying about if you're going to come out of there and, you know, harm someone else, and it's just very tragic all the way around. I can't imagine having to reopen that every time that someone was coming up for parole.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing I thought was so sad is, we'll touch on Skylar's Law, but they have turned the site where she was murdered into a memorial, and her dad does go out there quite a bit, which is heartbreaking.
It is.
It is. There's so many devastating things, you know, for her family and her friends. You know, she's very well loved in this case. But the one thing that leaves Skylar a bit of a legacy that she never got to leave herself, or wasn't done. She wasn't done leaving her mark on this world. But her parents, with the help of some sponsors at the legislature, were able to pass Skylar's Law. So that was a really beautiful tribute and a very strong thing to do by the nieces, to be able to appear and get that passed for her.
It's just so amazing. They're so inspiring to me. That's
very strong.
One of the things about this. I hope they know how much we think about them, because they're just so inspiring.
I agree.
To take grief and do something so incredible has always been something that I have found just so inspiring and awing, you know, that people can take grief and turn it into something positive and make change, real change.
Right. And Skylar's Law maybe wouldn't have even helped Skylar. And Vanessa, I don't know what you think about that. The fact that even that they could go and advocate for something that maybe wouldn't have changed anything, but it's going to help one person. I just think that's very commendable.
I do too. I feel the same way. Because it probably wouldn't have made a difference in her case, but at the same time, it's not in vain completely. And I think that hopefully helped them in some way. Like when we retell these stories, we were talking about this. I always hope that even though we all are true crime buffs and we like to go through these stories, I hope that when we tell these stories, someone can take something from it and use it as a cautionary tale. Because then, you know, in my mind anyways, they don't die in vain. You know, you can take something from it besides just talking about it.
That's
and
right.
you never know.
And even though we talked a lot about the crime, and that's what we talk about in here, to talk about Skylar again, because she's not forgotten in the minds of her friends and family.
No.
important to remember who she was and who she wanted to be. So that's one thing I really appreciate about us taking the time to discuss this case, even though it's not hot and active right now in the media, that it is something that we can look back on and say, how did this happen, and really puzzle over it. But we can also remember the life of a young woman who was gone.
Right. I've thought so much while studying this. I've thought, who knows where she would be right now? She could be
Me
a
too.
lawyer, already done with law school, just so many wonderful opportunities. It's such a sad situation, but it's good that you can take whatever good from it that you can, and lessons, and just remembering her.
And there is a petition, I don't know if you guys saw this, on change.org to asking that Sheila and Rachel serve their full sentences. Did you guys see that?
I didn't, but I'd like to go sign it.
Yeah, I know. I just saw that the other day and thought I would definitely, because I can't imagine her, you're always looking at these dates like way out in the future, but the fact that Rachel is up, and that'll fly by. And I don't know.
It really will. And I also wanted to mention, there's also a lot of good, if you're super into this case, one thing that I know that's really good in this case is a book called Pretty Little Killers, and it's written by Joffrey Fuller and Daleen Berry. That is an excellent book. If you are looking for something further in this case to get even more detail, that is a very detailed book. I was very impressed by it. So I just wanted to say that they're great authors, and I think what they really did something through this book, and it really helps in the essence of, just like we said, telling the crime, but remembering Skylar most importantly.
Yes. Thank you, Chrissy and Michelle. And we can open up for questions now or comments if you guys have any. That's a good point, Sherry. I'll put the link for that change.org, and I will find it and put it in the video, because in case anyone does want to sign it, I know I will. Let's see. I know I missed one up above, but hopefully we've answered most of your questions. Oh, you grew up an hour away? Yeah, it's a very upsetting case. This is there's those cases that, we read about true crime all the time, and they're never easy. And I wouldn't say by any means that I'm desensitized to it, but there's those cases that do hit you harder than others, for sure. And I think anytime there's a child case, definitely. But this one is one of those that kept me up at night and bothered me a lot. I think for multiple different reasons. I don't know about you guys, but
I agree. I think we're looking for the boogeyman, and especially in that age where we're starting to have a lot of social media pick up and talking about cyber crime, and like your child possibly meeting the wrong person online, and it's in their backyard, and it's their peer. It's shocking. These girls were supposed to be like sisters, and the betrayal, I think, is really what takes it over the edge for me.
Oh, it's terrible. For instance, the second grade, that is just so hard. It's crazy with friends like these. Isn't that what we say?
Yeah. Yep. I agree. And someone up here said, if a teenage friend killed one of my daughters, I'd have a very hard time not retaliating. Yeah, you and me both. And I kept thinking that the whole time we were studying this for this live. Hats off to them for handling themselves the way they did. I don't know.
I don't know the answer to this. Beth, do you?
I can't really see. Let's see. The murder.
Thank you, Danny.
I can't see the comment. I can't see very well on my phone. Can you read it to me?
Sure. You got it, Vanessa? You good reader?
Yeah, she's asking, do you know what happened in the murder that happened that they were talking about in biology class? She's referring to when, science class, when they were
They had found a body. I'm not exactly sure what ended up coming out of the crime or what was met, but they had found a body nearby. And so basically the whole entire town was talking about it. But I don't know specifics on that case specifically. But I do know that the fact that the body was found, I had the biology class talking about decompositions, forensics, things with bodies. And so that's what brought it up.
How would you hide a body? I think is what evolved from that conversation.
Right.
Wow.
Get rid of
Because
something
they
like
had
that.
even, allegedly they had even talked about other ways of killing Skylar and had decided that was the best route. They had talked about feeding her to hogs. They had talked about putting her in acid and things like that. So yeah, I think that probably they were sick. Right.
And Blonde PT, I totally agree with you. I was thinking a lot about this before the live started. I absolutely think that, I know people have differing opinions on this, but I absolutely think this is an important story to tell your teenage daughter if they're in some kind of toxic friendship. I know I did mine, even though she's a little bit younger. I think, again, it's important to tell them, just, you never know. I'm sure.
I did see Marshall's question. Yeah, you've got some girls like Chrissy Swanson and Shania Ammons. There were some girls that were close to Sheila, friends with Sheila and Rachel. Those girls caught a lot of flack trying to stand up for them during this time. But at this point, I believe everybody, knows exactly what was going on. But those girls were questioned. There was questions around them. There was questions basically around anybody that had anything to do with Sheila and Rachel and Skylar. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it does hit close to home. I agree. I think that's why this one's so hard. You do everything you can to keep your kids safe. And then I know when we were talking about a lot of these cases and there's a lot of sneaking out. We're talking about that happens, I think, in these. That's another conversation that I actually had with my daughter about the whole.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. That's what should, I think, come out of things like this is you learn things to talk to your kids about that you might not have thought about before. And that's what cases like this can do to help other parents in situations.
Moon River wants to know if they were standing up for them after the arrest.
After the arrest, I think they've got pretty quiet after the arrest. I think a lot of after the arrest, I think a lot of it was defense of themselves because they as well were being attacked. Like I said, anybody that had anything to do with Sheila and Rachel. And so it all kind of quieted down after the arrest. I think everybody pretty much accepted that they had done it. Even though they didn't want to believe that either, which is not shocking to me. I would never think that someone that I had been friends with for years, I don't know what kind of red flag that have to give me to know they were capable of murder.
Right.
That's pretty intense. I mean,
yeah.
And there's so much about this case. We really just wanted to tell the story of what happened and, bring this to the forefront again. However, there's a lot that is, kind of peripheral to the case.
right.
And from that book that Beth mentioned, there's some really good information. And if you're familiar with it, I know you're probably dying to talk about it, but hopefully we can talk about this again, maybe in Patreon or something kind of.
Yes. We can do some of the things we weren't able to discuss today. We like to try to keep things factual and as much on the channel, and then in Patreon we can get into even a deeper discussion. That would be great.
Yeah, we must have all seen Marshall's comment. I absolutely want to address all of these, and I think that is, again, we try to stick to the facts, like Amanda said, and there are a lot of rumors kind of around this case, and you can go down those rabbit holes too about motive and all kinds of stuff that's going on. And so we'll talk about that. I guess we'll just go into that Wednesday a little deeper. So if you guys did,
Sounds great.
like this live and want to get into a little more, we'll get into it more Wednesday and Patreon, True Crime and Wine. I think would be a good place, a good setting for that.
It would.
I agree, Sherry. I appreciate your comment that it's also important to help our young people understand that that kind of speech, that kind of threat you can't sit idly by, because if the worst happens and it could have been prevented, then I hope that people will come forward.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Jana, that's the $1 million question. And we talked about this a lot, and there's a lot of discussion around this. The reason.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I would say is that Rachel said that the last thing that Skylar asked her was why. And eventually when Rachel came in and she said that they had attacked her, they stabbed her, law enforcement had the same question for Rachel Shove, which was why. And her response, though nothing could ever justify what they did, her response was particularly callous and infuriating. And she said, we just didn't like her anymore. We didn't want to be friends with her.
Yep. Which I don't know. I can't wrap my mind around that being the total.
No, I don't think that is. But yeah,
No.
No, but the fact that
it
was given in her interview, so we do know it happened, and we do know that just another exasperating moment in this where you think this is so senseless and horrifying.
Oh, it is. It is. And just to know that she absolutely said that word for word is just, all the while she's holding a bucket that she can throw up in if she needs to. I just find it's just so, it's perplexing. It's perplexing.
Thank you, Kelly. Robin, we're trying to set some facts tonight. We're going to dive a little more into that, I think, this week on Wednesday and Patreon, because I don't know the answer to that to be able to tell you factually yes or no. There's just a lot of speculation at this point. I agree, Michael. Thank you, Michelle. I definitely think there were other things at play. Well, that's another thing we talked about too, DJ. The whole thrill kill part of it. Was it just, could they get away with it? And they just wanted to see if they could. And she was the outsider. I don't know. That's a good possibility too.
Yeah, I cannot pretend to understand what's happening in minds. So
right.
Me either.
It's almost that anything would seem strange, but also anything could fit. I don't understand the thought process there. So it's difficult to.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
I totally agree. It's so far off from anything I know that I would think. So it is hard. Yep. Yeah, Teresa, that's the most common theory in this case. And I do think there's a lot to support that. But again, I don't know.
They have Skylar's diary, and that's where that theory has come into play.
Mm-hmm.
Written by Skylar herself in her diary. But again, that's not something that we have seen or that we have, so you have to get inside sources for that type of thing.
Yep. And that is correct. No, they did not. As far as I'm aware, if it were true, I don't think anyone was aware. And yes, Rachel did get married to someone on the outside while she's been in prison. I saw someone ask that up there. They've been in prison since, when did they actually go? I think it was 2014, right? I mean, they were arrested in 2013, but.
Right.
But Rachel is up for parole in 2 years from this month, actually.
Right.
I do too, Sharon. I think it's weird that they can, but yeah, she did get married. Do you know much about her? I think she married a female, correct? Rachel?
I don't know.
I think that's what I read, but don't quote me on that.
I have no idea.
I was really digging on trying to get information in prison because I know there was some interest in that, and I was really having a hard time.
I know. It's hard to find anything from when they were in prison.
Mm-hmm. Rachel's mom did ask her about the cut on her ankle because it was bad looking.
Yes, I didn't want to derail us, but the day after, right before she went to that church camp, she did go on a little boating excursion with her mother and her mother's friend. They both did notice that she had a pretty bad cut on her ankle that was from her scuffle
Right.
with Skylar whenever Skylar managed to get the knife.
Wow. She did marry a female. Okay.
Thanks, Teresa.
Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you, T.
Teresa brought her binder. She's like, I've got the facts right here. I thought that's what it was. I just didn't want to. Yeah, I didn't want to be wrong on that. So yeah, exactly, Shanna.
I don't know, Marshall. I'm not sure.
Thank you, Blonde PT. Yeah, they are. They're in the same prison. We talked about that a little bit ago, but they, from what I could find, because I thought that was fascinating, they do not have any contact and they're completely separated.
Right.
Hey, Brianne.
They shouldn't be allowed to. That's so I still am kind of floored that they're at the same prison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was. And again, we'll go into a little more of the details, I think, on Wednesday. But we appreciate you guys hanging out with us tonight and spending your time with us. And thank you, Beth and Amanda. This was fun. We'll have to do this again.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on for this.
Oh, you're so awesome.
I know.
I love you.
We're excited to have you on.
I will certainly talk to you soon.
Yes.
And I just want to say before we go, we do have, I know we've been busy. I'm sure everyone's like, they've seen our faces almost, I think, every day this week. It's been busy at Unmasked. We've had a lot of lives. I think we've probably had more lives the past week than we have in the past 4 months. So, but anyway, we have more planned, and we do have one planned for Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And then, of course, we have Teresa's show that's every Friday, and those have been awesome. So that'll be next Friday, and Beth is joining her next Friday. So that one's going to be really good. I'm excited to watch that one, too. It's going to be on Jeffrey McDonald, which is a case that I love and have followed.
I'm excited for that, too. That's going to be a good discussion.
Yeah. So we've got Tuesday, and then, of course, we've got True Crime and Wine Wednesday and Patreon, and we've got, and I thought this would be a slow week. No, it's not. And then Friday, we have Jeffrey McDonald. So hopefully you guys can join us on all those as well. And then God knows what else we'll plan before the end of the week. Something, I'm sure.
Always.
Yeah. So thank you guys. And I hope you guys have a great night.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
And stay safe.